town from Broadway when they had a cast change when it went to the Helen Hayes. So it was a real dream ride. It really was.
Get to play Stacy.
Yeah, Stacy Jacks. The most fun I ever had without being arrested.
Because he's wanted, dead or alive. Mm-hmm. Now, you obviously wanted to be a rock star, and you wanted to find a way to do that, and you got the chance to be on the show Rockstar with INXS. How did that happen?
Well, that was just, my gosh. It's kind of those things that I look back on at the time, and I go, I still can't believe that all these pieces were in place at the right time and the right place. Because I was actually in London again at that time. I was working, playing Galileo in We Will Rock You, which was the Queen musical. And I had done it for 2 years. I had just signed for my third-year contract, playing the lead. And I loved this show so much, but someone that told me that they were auditioning for a replacement for Michael Hutchence in the Australian superband INXS, and I was fascinated by this project because I was a huge INXS fan, and coming from Sydney, they were the soundtrack of my youth, and I was so proud of the boys, and Michael Hutchence was the absolute ultimate rock star, and I thought, well, I found this whole project really interesting. I said, they're going to be a reality show, and they're auditioning all over the world. They're auditioning in London for the show. It's going to be shot in Los Angeles. And these are you can just go online and secure a time for your audition, which I did. And then I went in there and did my audition and thinking, well, let's see what happens with this, without having any intention of actually leaving We Will Rock You because I love doing the show. But then I got a call back saying, MiG, we want you to come back and sing for us again. So I did that, and then I sang one more time, and then they gave me the call and say, there's a whole American Idol moment. It says, Dog, you're going to Hollywood. MiG, we want to fly you to L.A. You're in the final 50. We have 2 weeks of auditions, of intense auditions for 2 weeks. You do psych tests. You do all these, aptitude tests. You have to do blood tests, all these background checks and everything like that. And the Wellers audition cut down from 50 to the final 25 to the final 20, and then I finally made it to the final 15 that made the show. And from the last audition I did in L.A. to the first day of filming of the actual TV series was exactly 2 months, which is exactly the amount of time I needed to get out of my contract out of We Will Rock You. I had a stipulation in there, and there was exactly 2 months. So it was to the day that if it was any day either or, I would not be able to take the job. So that's why I say it was just like this. All these planets were in alignment all at the same time. So within 2 months, I was like, okay, well, here I go. I left this really secure, awesome job in London, really well-paying, awesome gig, and the biggest show in London to be a possibility, possibly being internationally humiliated on television. But, the stakes were high because if I gotten someplace with this show, I thought this could be a whole new chapter in my life.
Right, exactly.
And it was a life changer.
When you're on these shows, do they pay you as a contestant or no?
You know what? They pay me a stipend. Everyone got a little bit, which kind of paid for my rent and paid for helped me pay my mortgage in London. It was basically that, though. I mean, it was a fraction of what I was earning doing We Will Rock You.
Of course.
But it was just a little bit, Reality TV, I don't hate to break it to all you guys disillusioned, but it's a really cheap way of making television because they pay them basically nothing. All the stars pour their lives and hearts out in front of everybody in real time, and they get nothing for it, really. I mean, at the same time, though, the possibility and the doors that they open up, the opportunities that can come here from doing that, are there, and of course, and so you take that risk. So you may not be getting much from the show, but what you can get out of the show, that's the payoff. And
you get to meet the band INXS, right?
Well, dude, it was more than that. I was not only gigging with the band, meeting the band, it was also hanging out with all these amazing people in Hollywood. Like Steve Lukather from Toto would be hanging out at recordings. He's good friends with the guy, so he'd be hanging out at the show. And we would have these parties at our mansion on the Hollywood Hills that we would go back to, and we just have these jam sessions that would play all night with, Dave Navarro would come over, we'd guys from INXS would come over, we'd have Steve Lukather coming and playing, we'd have these session musicians just hanging out. The lead singer of Chicago came over. We have people like, Seth Green coming over and just hang because he was a big fan of the show. It was just like one of those really pinch me, I must be dreaming moments. It really was life-changing, and I look back on it now. It was one of the greatest moments of my life.
But, sadly, he was not chosen to be in the band.
But, pew, pew, I came third. I made the final. It was fine. And I actually, by the time I got to the final, I realized they weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at either JD or Marty. And I knew that I just wanted to make it to the final. Once I made it to the final, I'm good. Because if you made the final, you won a car. All three people won a car. We all won a car each. We won a new Honda sports Civic. It was two-door coupe. It was hot. It was awesome. And then we also I got signed to Universal Records from there. And they sponsored me to get my green card, so I got my U.S. Permanent residency from that, as well as doing a lot of gigs. And I was invited to a lot of functions, stuff like that. So I may not have become the lead singer of INXS, but I definitely got a lot out of it, and I'm still paying dividends from that. People still remember that show for some reason, and they say, "Oh, Meg, I remember you in that show. It was great." And so it's nice that if I was going to do any reality show, I'm really glad that I did that one.
They can never tear us apart. That's right.
Oh! Thank you. Mic drop. Boom. So yes, Queen.
Queen. You did "We Will Rock You." So it was it a kind of, I never seen the show. Was it like kind of a fantasy story with Queen's music, or was there something?
Yes. No, it was a script. It was actually not about Queen, but it was set in the future. And Ben Elton wrote the script. He's a famous writer, written hundreds of books, and he's writer of The Young Ones and Red Dwarf, and he's just incredibly smart, very funny guy, stand-up comedian and actor. And he wrote this very prophetic script about a time in the future when people would be addicted to their mobile devices and live their entire lives online. This was written in 2001, 2002, years before Facebook and even smartphones and before anything. So
he called it.
He called it. Fast forward a few years into the future, and it's exactly what everyone's doing. Everyone's completely addicted to their mobile devices and live entirely online. So but he got a lot of stick from the way that he said, people said, oh, it's a very basic script and it's far-fetched and it's, he had so much stick out of it. But I actually thought it was a brilliant script, and I loved the show. It was set in the future, but this guy called Galileo Figaro, he made up his name because he heard it in his dream. He hears all these song lyrics in his dream, like it's almost like he's channeling all these dead rock stars, and they're speaking through him. And through that, he meets a group of these renegade people called the Bohemians, and they fight the evil Killer Queen, and find the golden red special axe which is hidden in the ruins of Wembley Stadium, and they save rock and roll and bring music back to the people, and freedom is restored to the galaxy. It's kind of like that. It's okay. It's a lot to put together in 2 hours. It's a lot of expositional, this is the plot. Let's explain how we got to here. But having said that, I loved it, and it was a chance for me to have a direct line with the guys from Queen. I was also able to play the lead in the biggest show in London at the time. The crazy thing is, from my first audition, walking in, and there's Brian May, Roger Taylor, Pippa Alien, Ben Elton, producers. There's Jim Beach, which they call Miami Beach. He was there too in the panel. All these guys you hear about from the Queen family are all there.
No pressure.
And no pressure. Pressure. So, and I sat to sing "We Are the Champions" at 11 o'clock in the morning to them, and God, it was incredible. So after about 5 auditions later, I was offered the job, the understudy to basically understudy Tony Vincent, who played the first Galileo. And when he left, they offered me the takeover part, which was a dream come true.
Did you do the Fandango?
I did the Fandango. Boy, it was thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening.
Nice. Now, was the show originally written in mind with the music of Queen, or was that something that was?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was written.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. Queen were involved in the production of the show. They were closely involved with the not so much in the writing of the script, but in the way the story developed and the way that it was put on stage. So right through the workshop periods, the Brian May and Roger Taylor were very much involved. But definitely it was. In fact, they actually wrote a sequel years later. This is after Rockstar INXS and everything. I was living in New York at the time, and Ben Elton had written a sequel with Brian May, and the show was called "The Show Must Go On," and they wanted to put this on. And so I went back to London, and we did a 2-week workshop of the show, and we performed it just for a very, very exclusive, limited audience. Stephen Burkhoff was in the audience. Emma Thompson was in the audience. Roger Taylor, of course, Brian May. Ben Elton decided to play one of the characters, Pop, on the stage with us. But it was just to show the fact that this show could work and had a chance to be developed. And unfortunately, it never got past that stage, even though the show was great. In fact, I think the script was even better than "We Will Rock You." The powers that be went, it's so much work to put one show on, to put the second one on. They wanted to focus on the band, and there was Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, coming out, so it kind of got shelved. So unfortunately, the show didn't go on.
It's the terror of knowing what this world is about,
Let me out! This is the thing. I actually did demos with Brian in his studio. In fact, was writing a couple of songs with him, and there's one song in particular that he really loved called "Send Down the Angels," which we demoed in his studio in UK, in England, and it was amazing experience, and we demoed it up to a point, and he really loved it. And but then when it came to the actual album, when I got signed to Universal, they wanted to do basically a covers album. It was mainly a covers album of all these symphonic classic rock songs done with a symphony orchestra, done classically, because I was signed to Decca, which was the Universal Classics. So that was their angle. They said, if they sign MiG, we're going to do this classical rock album in a classical way. Okay, cool. But the way I tried to include Queen in that is that I did this song, "Who Wants to Live Forever." And "Who Wants to Live Forever" was a beautiful arrangement. Paul Buckmaster, who had done the string arrangements for Elton John, did the arrangements for this, and it was lush and rich. Unfortunately, Brian didn't play on the album. We wanted him to, and he was trying to, but he just couldn't clear his schedule to do it. So unfortunately, he didn't end up on the album. But at least I can say that we helped develop the project to get myself to the album. Put it that way.
And were you pleased with the final result?
I loved it. I loved the final result. I think we set out what we achieved. We achieved what we set out to do. And this is the thing, we wanted to make it, as rich and as symphonic as possible, as well as me retaining some rock and roll vibes about it. We tried to minimize the rhythm section to really make use of the orchestra. But then sometimes we had to say, look, we need a drum kit here. We need an electric guitar in this point. We need this. And so we added bits and pieces here and there. But what we came together was an album co-produced by Matthew Wilder, who produced No Doubt's album, and who also had some string of hits in the 80s. Ain't nothing gonna break my stride. Nobody gonna slow me. Yeah. And who also incidentally wrote the music for the Disney musical movie Mulan. and Mulan's coming out too.
Oh.
He wrote the music. Yeah, he's incredibly talented. Super
I guess
cool
nothing
guy. Great
nothing
producer.
did break us stride, really.
There you go.
It's true.
And we wrote a few songs together. We have that on the album. I'm very proud of those. And also worked with a fantastic producer, writer, arranger, Rob Mathis. He's an incredibly talented, gifted artist. Sings, he plays every instrument. He's like one of my heroes. And to work with him